All right, so the hand is still recovering. It's coming along, but we're going to keep the tier lists rolling. This time looking at Arcana cards. Hopefully you guys like these while the injury persists. I've got a little bit of gameplay coming back, but yeah, should be more in action in the coming week. Fair warning, this tier list, it's a little out of date. Some of the descriptions and names and stuff here are a little bit off, but we'll go through everything here. So, getting right into it, we're going to be starting with the Sorceress. Okay, so the Sorceress, while you're channeling your Omega moves, for up to 4 seconds, it's going to slow down everything around you. And it's got a grasp cost of 1. So, I'm going to drop it up here in S. Now, in S, I think we've got everything here that is basically an auto include. Now, there's definitely times you're going to flex stuff out. You're not going to use Omega moves. But for the most part, most builds, most aspects are going to take advantage of Omega moves to some degree. Cases where you're not, I can think of like Medea. You're going to purposefully take Valve Panic. Make sure you don't have any magic regen. And you're just going to alternate between the special and the attack. Push out tons of damage. It's very, very effective. But for just about everything else, you're going to take advantage of some bit of this. For aspects that require it more than others, it's a total lifesaver. And it's gotten even better in the most recent patch now that Chronos is affected by this sort of time dilation effect. So just another case for it. Like I said, with 1 grasp, it's just about an auto include. Very, very few cases where you wouldn't take it. The levers. So the levers, I gotta go ahead, also drop this up into S. So when this is maxed out, 3 hits, your first 3 hits that you take from Guardians are gonna be negated, basically. So if you still have the vow that's gonna make you take extra damage from the first instance of damage, it doesn't override that. So you're gonna get your 3 hits negated. 4th hit is still gonna deal increased damage, unfortunately. But here's the thing, this is good across all difficulties. Again, I think this is 2 grasps, so very, very cheap. But when you're just getting used to the game, you're going to get hit a lot. So, okay, negating 3 hits, that's pretty good. It's just immediate value. And then when you're really good at the game, on the other end of things, you're cranking up your vows, how much damage you're going to be taking. And now you're going to be negating these huge instances of damage, right? Guardians deal crazy amounts of damage as you start to jack up those vows. So yeah, negating the hardest hitting things in the game. Of course, that's very, very good. In fact, I would probably put it above the Sorceress now that I think about it. But even still, I think there's going to be a lot of things sort of in this jumbled space. Basically, an auto include, yeah, good with every single aspect. You know, maybe if you're speed running or something, it's not so important because you're just breezing through the game anyway. But yeah, all levels, I think you're going to want it. What do we have here? The Swift Runner. Okay, so the Swift Runner, this is changed a bit from the tooltip. I'm going to go ahead and drop this into B. So it only costs 1 grasp. It's going to make you sprint 10% faster, and it makes your dash faster, which actually has a bit of a negative effect. So I don't really tend to notice the dash, but when you have it off, it means you're going to have more invincibility frames because the dash is actually taking longer. So there is a bit of a trade-off. Maybe if you get like really into the nitty-gritty, there's an extra reason to actually have it off. The thing with the Swift Runner, it is cheap, so I usually want to have it on, and moving fast is good. It's just that they increased your base move speed from when this tooltip was originally printed, so you don't really feel like you absolutely need that extra speed. It's just nice to have. So it's certainly something that's on the bubble a lot of times. You know, I can still be at range shooting at enemies, or I can, you know, charge up an Omega attack on an axe and then dash into the midst of them. I don't necessarily have to be sprinting all over the place all the time. Nice to have. It's cheap. It tends to fit into most builds once again. So something you always want to be looking at, but it's in B here just because I think it's something you shouldn't be scared to take off either. Experiment a little bit with it, without it. See if you can maybe squeeze something else in. It's going to be pretty effective as well. Eternity. Giving you 3 death defiances. Well, there's a reason why we have the triple S category. No controversy, nothing to really say about this. You get revived 3 times, and not only do you get revived 3 times, bringing back 40% of your health and magic, you also have a chance to refill these things. So by taking this, having the slots available, you can get death defiances back from the shop, from Echo, from Narcissus, even Nemesis. There might be more instances. Anyway, lots of ways to get it back. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Keep it on all the time. This one in particular is what makes turning off all your Arcana cards very, very difficult if you're going for 55 Fear, the real crazy challenge that I don't believe has been done yet. Yeah, easy triple S. What do we have here? This is the Centaur. Let me double check. Yeah, the Centaur. So when this is maxed out, you're going to get 5 HP and 5 life. What is it? After every 5 locations that you enter, and you've got to have cards activated from Grasp 1 through 5. So I'm going to put in A here. It's just solid. Over the course of the run, ending up with more HP, more magic. It's good. And the reason I put it in A, actually as high as I would put it, is because it's really easy to activate. Actually, most times, I'm not really thinking about that awakening effect. It just kind of is on. It's actually a surprise when it gets turned off, because most good setups just tend to have, grasps 1 through 5 already accounted for. So I think if you're messing around and you find a setup you really, really like, and this one happens to be off, that's okay. That's sort of the other side of the coin. 5 health and 5 magic, it's not a lot, and it also comes into play, down the road, right? You're only getting it after every 5 locations, so that's like +10 after the first region. After the second, you're looking at +20. So like, it takes a long time before it really, really ramps up. And even by the end of it, it's just kind of okay. But if you're getting it for essentially free, right, off of the Awakening, doesn't cost any grasp, fantastic choice. But yeah, don't be too afraid if you want to mess around with it actually being off. All right, the Moon. So this has actually been renamed to the Night, and it's going to improve your Omega cast damage. I'm going to go ahead and drop it into B as well. So it's good if you're using the Omega cast, and that's a big if. Lots of aspects, lots of setups, builds don't really require you to use the Omega cast, and it's just okay if it's not really required as part of your build. So Persephone, obviously you want to use it to build up your special gauge. Momus, you're going to be using it a lot, right? Planting it is kind of like a turret. It's going to go off again and again. In other cases, if you're just running with any sort of other build, the thing is you're not really going to be looking for a boon to fill that cast slot or to have some sort of impact on the Omega cast. So a lot of times you'll just be without anything that's there anyway. And then probably the best time to use it is while stuff is spawning. And a lot of times you'll have other things that are out competing it anyway. So maybe while stuff's spawning, I'm actually charging up an Omega attack or Omega special or something like that, depending on the aspect. And that's just going to beat out the Omega cast. So there just isn't room for it. But I'll put it in B here just because, at times where you want it, you really feel the impact of it. Charon, another one, it's just like a must-have. It's so good, right? You absolutely need it. But in those other cases, I think it's very, very rare that you actually turn it on. One of the few things that you'll flex out. Now, it is worth noting, that it will actually activate what is now called the moon, right? It changed names, the moon and the night. It will turn that on as an awakening thing. So that's also another little piece to look at. If you really want that activated, we'll talk in more detail about it later, but sometimes I think it's going to be worth just activating for that effect. So something to keep in mind. Strength. Okay, strength. I think I'm going to go ahead and drop this here. I really, really like strength. So while you're below 30% health when this is maxed out, you're going to take 50% less damage, but you're going to deal 50% more. If you're looking at this from a new player's perspective, you're playing at lower fears, pretty effective because you're going to be taking damage quite a bit. You're new. That's what happens, right? And you'll have the ability to actually get low in that strength range and then heal back a little bit and sort of like yo-yo back and forth. Well, you're in it, you're not in it, but you'll be able to take advantage of it a good amount of the time. 50% extra damage is huge, and when you're negating damage by 50% and you don't have vows that are adding additional damage, you really, really notice the damage reduction. Like, it is super impactful. Now, on the flip side, very, very high fear runs, you're often going to be using the pin for survivability, coming back at 60 HP. 60 HP is going to be close or sometimes within that strength range, just depending on the other things you end up picking up along the way. Sometimes you end up with a lot of health. 60 is just going to be, I have guaranteed 50% extra damage for the rest of the run and 50% damage negation, unless maybe a Death Defiance triggers or something like that. But it's going to mean it's active for a long, long time. So I think it tends to be an auto-include in many setups. It's 4 grasp, so it's on the expensive side. I do find it's pretty easy to weave in, and it's in a location where you can actually complete a column a lot of the time for Divinity, activating Divinity. So also really nice placement within the whole Arcana card setup. So what is the downside to this? Why is this not like triple S if it's on all the time? Well, it's actually not that great if you're sort of a middle-of-the-road player. You've learned enough for the game that maybe you're making it to Chronos a lot. Maybe you're pushing fears. You're going for 16, 20, 32, something like that. Eris is giving you some grief. Where people tend to find their walls, it tends to be on bosses. So once you've got the game kind of understood, you're going to get through normal encounters pretty easily. And then you're going to get to bosses, and you're going to get crushed until you learn their attack patterns and get better and better. Well, that means during your regular encounters, your HP is going to be super, super high. It's no problem. You can keep it high. Maybe you've still got vows on that will allow you to recover as well, so it's super easy to just keep your HP topped up. And then when you hit bosses, that's the one time you're going to dip down, activate strength for just a little bit of the boss fight, and then you're going to come out of it. You might even get a fountain that can recover, and strength is no longer active again. And so you can see if it's 4 grasp for that effect, and it's only really coming on during boss fights, if you find that's the situation that you're playing with a lot, then strength is just not worth it. It's absolutely not worth it. But yeah, in those other 2 cases, you're a new player or a very experienced player pushing very high fears, I think it's insanely good. Almost an auto-include. Again, I think there's a little bit of room for flexing it out, but I always try to make my builds include it. The Fates. So the Fates is going to let you re-roll location rewards a few times. I'm going to go ahead and put this like high B. This can be good. Extra rerolls are good, but the location reward effect, how good is that versus like boon rerolling, that sort of thing? I think it's just not as effective. Where I tend to see value in this is a run where you pick a keepsake for a particular god. Generally, that's how you start. Let's say we're going in the underworld. We pick something like Hera. We go for Engagement Ring. It's totally busted at the moment. But you really want something else. You want Aphrodite's attack afterwards, or you want something to apply origination. So you want Demeter, or something like that, right? There's a second god you want to target, and you want to target them early, probably because of time limits, or, you know, maybe it's just a fear that's very, very high for you. It's like 32. You really want to get your build online as early as possible. That's where the Fates comes in quite handy. You're able to re-roll those locations, try to get that second god that you really, really want. Especially for something like Origination, you've got more options from a god like Demeter to actually be able to apply it. It's a little more difficult if you're looking specifically also for, say, like Aphrodite's attack, because you're often going to have to spend some rerolls on the first boon that you're going to get. Maybe I'm spending them for Engagement Ring. Do I really have that many more to roll location and then roll for more boons? Maybe. It's going to depend if you end up getting a full, complete reroll set, but yeah, that's really the case for it. I think that only applies to a few setups and some very, very high fear setups, or just, again, like PBs, that kind of thing. In general, this is one that I'll flex out pretty often, actually. It's just in, yeah, those few certain cases that I really, really want it. I'd rather do different rerolls, rather do the boon rerolls. The Boatman. Boatman, I'm going to drop here into C. It's fine. You get, what is it? I think it's like 300 gold, which is okay. But if you're pushing higher fears, it doesn't even have to be very high fears. Everything's going to cost 80% more anyway. It's one of the first vows I think most people take. It's quite easy to work around. So gold loses its efficacy very, very fast. Where it's really useful for is actually in Awakening, that bottom left card, where you're going to end up getting more rerolls. So a lot of times you're like, I'm getting a bunch of extra money and these extra rerolls, but it costs 5. 5 grasp is a lot. So again, I think it's really only applicable in that case where you need those first 2 gods in the first region. You need it super early to get your setup going. In any other case, you're probably not using those rerolls for quite some time. If you're not using them in region 1, you're spreading it out to 2 and 3. Maybe you're spending money a little bit later because, you know, who knows how many shops you're actually going to get by those times. You'd be better off with other Arcana cards that are going to give you a lot of value just immediately right out of the gate. So it's fine. There's no real negative to getting money, as well as getting some extra rerolls if you're going to go the full reroll set in that bottom left corner. But it's for sure, it's the last one of those 3 you're going to want to put in just because the cost is so high. Origination. Now this one is very, very interesting. Where do I put Origination? I think a lot of people are going to hate this. I'm going to put it at the top of A here, not quite into S. I think a lot of people see this as like S or even like triple S. So what does it do? When it's maxed out, you're going to deal 50% extra damage to any enemy that has 2 curse effects applied to them. Now, I think the reason why a lot of people think this is really good is in their head, it is just free 50% extra damage, which is awesome, right? But it really isn't the case. And I think a big part of the reason why people see that, if you watch videos, it could be speedrunning videos, could just be people who upload stuff online, you're seeing the best of the best. You're seeing the runs that work out, where Origination is activated, everything goes well. You know, maybe they're piling in a bunch of those rerolls just to like guarantee that they're getting it right off the bat. But what you don't see is, for one, all the things that failed, all the runs that failed along the way, that Origination just didn't happen to pop up. And as well, you're not seeing the trade-off very obviously. So where does it sort of fall off? What are the drawbacks of it? Well, for one, it costs 5 psyche to actually, or 5 grasp to actually activate. So it's quite expensive if you want to weave it in. And that means that you're giving up some other cards. You might have to give up something like Strength, which is very, very potent. You might have to give up some rerolls, so there's less consistency in hitting Origination. Or you've got to give up some defensive stuff, right? Like maybe I can't be fast. Maybe I can't have slowdown on my Omega moves. Yeah, there is some sacrifice there. The other thing is, Origination is not going to be active right out of the gate, no matter what. So if you're going for high fears, you've got the Onion on. Usually it's one of the last things you want to put on. You're not going to be able to get even your first keepsake, right? Your, let's say, Engagement Ring, very popular choice. That's your first curse effect. You're not going to get that till, like, location 4, and then you might get the second one by, like, 7 or 8, something like that. So it comes online a little bit later. And then when you're actually applying the damage, well, let's say I drop Engagement Ring, and I'm using Hestia's attack or Demeter's attack, something like that, to actually go ahead and apply it. Well, the damage from Engagement Ring, right there, that isn't going to apply Origination. And then when you actually go to deal the extra damage, apply that second curse so that Origination is active, you're doing it with a boon that is less potent than the alternative. So yeah, Demeter, great. Now I'm going to get that extra 50% damage. But what if I just had Aphrodite on my weapon? You know, is that 50% more from that? Well, it could be. So a lot of times you want to look from Origination, or look for Origination from another effect. So Demeter's Sprint is a very, very popular one. But again, if I'm taking the Sprint, well, now maybe I'm passing up an attack for a little while, right? Just for the first region or two, something like that. I'll try to target an attack later, but it's harder to target that attack. I think you can see where I'm going with this. It's good. I'm putting it at the top of A. It's very, very good. It's just not an auto include. I think you have to be a lot more mindful of what am I actually trying to do with this weapon. You know, if I'm just playing with Thanatos, Aspect of Thanatos or Malinois, I kind of just want to do the attack and Omega attack in tandem with the cast, obviously. It's free extra damage a lot of the time. But do I want an Origination effect on my attack? Not really. I want Aphrodite or I want Apollo, something like that. And then what about the Sprint? Do I want to have to sprint between my attacks to activate Demeter's thing? Is it worth giving up 5? It's a real question, right? It's a real question. I think this is something that people just need to consider a little bit more instead of making it an auto-include. But absolutely, it's still very good when you get 50% extra damage. It's huge. It's not to be understated here. It is a very powerful effect. So certainly good for a lot of builds, but I think just be a little bit more conscious before auto-including it in every one of your runs. Excellence. Okay, this is, I don't think we're going to actually get to see the full texture. I can't remember the number. Any boons you're offered have an additional chance to be rare. I'm going to go ahead and drop that into D. I don't think it's very good. I don't even remember the exact cost of it. It's like 3 or 4. It's pretty expensive. Having things rare, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, with vows, a lot of times, if you're taking anything at like 10 plus, you're probably going to take the vow that's going to make sure you're priming your magic with taking higher rarity boons. So a lot of time you want to target common boons anyway. The other thing, keepsakes. Keepsakes are going to help you target the boons that you really, really want for your build, right? I really need an attack. I really want Engagement Ring, that kind of thing. I get to improve the rarity of those with my keepsake anyway. So excellence is really saying, okay, sure, maybe it might start at rare, which is a little bit better. I can go from rare to epic or something like that more often than just, you know, common to rare. But a lot of times it's just going to be hitting the boons that you don't really need. Okay, it gives me a little bit extra dodge chance. It gives me, a little extra damage on my base cast or something like that. Is this Is this all that useful? The placement on the overall layout is not usually very conducive to getting Divinity activated. There's a lot of things with it I think are just very, very lackluster. Yeah, the jump from common to rare is just not all that desirable in a lot of cases. There's better ways to get that rarity. I think it's generally better to have this turned off. The Wayward Sun, this one's a little bit tough as well. I'm going to go ahead and put this into A as well. Yeah, is it appropriate for A? Boy. Let's knock it down. The bottom of A, top of B, something like that. The thing is, the Wayward Sun, it's going to give you 4 life for every location that you exit when it's maxed out. And then when your health's actually low, when you're below 30%, that number is doubled. So it's insane. It's like 1 grasp to actually use it. Unbelievably good at low fears. If you have any bit of heal available to you, even if it's 50%, this is still so useful. Just between those rooms, if you think how much it heals you over the course of the run for 1 grasp, it can be like 100 or more. It's very, very, very effective. But, of course, it drops off at really high fears where you're turning off the healing. It's just useless. There's no way to get any effect out of it. So, honestly, not a lot to say about it. It's cheap and crazy, crazy effective up to fears probably in the 20s, maybe the 30s, as you sort of start to crank things up. And then just completely drops off after that. So, should that be like a high B, low A, something like that? Who really cares? It's pretty good overall, but yeah, extremely good at the low end, extremely useless at the high end. All right, and then we got the Queen. So the Queen, oh boy. I feel like I got to put this into D as well. So it's going to give you like a 6% increased chance of duo boons. I think probably a little bit better than Excellence. And that's mostly because it can be activated with Awakening. The thing is, the Awakening is very, very hard to make work in just general setups. You have to make sure you don't have 2 cards with the same amount of grasp activated. It's like the opposite of the Centaur. I always have that. I feel like in every setup, I want multiple 1s, multiple 3s, sometimes 4s. There's so much in those middle numbers that are jam-packed that are really, really good. Just the fact that you have to give up, like say, now I can't have the Sorceress and Swift Runner. That's super annoying. I can't have Strength and what's another good for? I don't know. I'd have to look at the whole setup. I think some re-rolls as well. Yeah, it's just really, really, really painful to give it. So already I just hate it because of the Awakening effect. But then you have to look at, well, what is the benefit? Okay, duo boons. Duo boons, typically you have to be very conscious of moving towards a particular duo boon. You might have a build or a setup very, very strong with 1 duo boon in mind. You don't necessarily have to hit it, but it's like generally you look at 2 gods, you say, I'd really, really like their effects anyway. Now, if I can activate this, I'm going to be picking them a lot. I could also get this other very strong effect. Now, duo boons don't tend to be like super, super meta in terms of 1, their achievability, and 2, their effectiveness. A lot of them are just not great. So if you're just sort of doing a run and then maybe ending up seeing a duo boon, you're often not even going to want to take it. It's not that effective, and it's not like Hades 1. You can't even sell it for a bunch of money or something like that. I can think of 1 duo boon. I forget what it's even called, but it's going to give you all those infusion duos that's very, very strong with the latest patch. So they have made some tweaks to make them a little more desirable. But I still think overall it's just not usually worth pursuing. It's more of a thing, I want to have some fun. I want to try out this duo. Let me go ahead and activate it and just see what a run with it is like. I think that's the actual use case for it. Alright, here we've got the Seer. The Seer, I'll put here kind of, yeah, mid B. Oh, here we go. So this is the Awakening effect to get extra rerolls. I believe it's 4 rerolls, and if you have the Fates active, the Boatman activated, and the final one that we'll come across at the bottom here. What is it called? The Champion's active. Then it's going to go ahead and activate as well. Just give you more rerolls. And when you have that, it means you could use them on locations or boons or shops or whatever it is. So, how good are extra rerolls? Well, I think I've talked about it in depth already. Very, very useful if you're planning on using them early and you're really trying to get a build online. I want Origination, and I want, Engagement Ring to be one part of that, and I want this really strong attack and all that kind of stuff. Really great for a setup like that. For the niche amount of people who speed run, very, very effective in trying to get that kind of perfect setup right out of the gate. But for most people, I think it's just very, very expensive to invest in. The Boatman is like so expensive, being 5, and then you got to go with the other 2. Do you really need that many rerolls? I think most times not. But when you need rerolls, it's really nice to have them. They are very powerful. Their effect is not to be understated, and you're still getting other rerolls along with it, right? In choosing it, plus all the extra gold from the Boatman. So it's not like you're investing it all and getting nothing back. I just don't think it's something that applies to every run. I think it applies to a pretty small subset of runs, but in that small subset, you quite like it. So just be very conscious about taking it. And then the champions, what we just talked about. I'm going to go ahead and put this pretty high, actually. I think a lot of times you're going to want to take this. Not every time. I don't think rerolls are good for every single player all the time. I think if you're playing without the onion and you're taking a keepsake, so what this is going to do is give you a few rerolls, and it's going to let you reroll boons, which is fantastic, right? But you're going to take that God keepsake right out of the gate, no onion, location 1, now you've got 3 options. It's nice to be able to say reroll for something like Engagement Ring. For sure, you get that thing earlier, but if you're not playing with the onion, you could also take something like the attack or the special, and usually you're okay with that, right? Oh, I'll take Hera's attack. That's fine. It's not my number 1 choice. I didn't see Engagement Ring, but now Hera's in the God pool, and your first few locations go super fast. Like, you just breeze through them. There's almost no enemies. Plus, now you've still got something that's probably useful in the attack or the special. You can get to your next God boon pretty quick. You might even have the opportunity, if you're running the Fates, to re-roll the door and try to make sure that you actually end up hitting the God that you want. So that's another thing with it. But basically, you're going to end up seeing that God more and more with them being in the pool. So it will unfold. And by investing in fewer rerolls, it lets you pick some safer options, which I think are good for like newer, and I would say even like mid-level players. I think if you're playing at like 32 Fear, I still don't think rerolls are like absolutely necessary. So yes, it's nice to have those rerolls with the champion right out of the gate, and it works pretty well in combination with additional rerolls for a location. But I don't think it's always necessary. Now, if you're using the onion and you're targeting something, you're going to feel the pain a lot more. I think it's a way bigger use case for the champions, because you really want to make sure the first time you see that God, now you're going to end up getting what you were hoping to get. Otherwise, you've got to wait quite a long time. It's how many more locations do you have to wait, and those locations take longer to clear, and so you really feel the pain of not getting what you were looking for. And then I would just say, in general, even if you don't really know what you're looking for, or you end up, let's say you just luckily end up with Engagement Ring as your first pick from Hera. Okay, fantastic. Well, now I got all these rerolls that I'm sitting on. It's nice. If I see Hephaestus in a high fear run, I can roll for Trusty Shield. If I now come across someone like Aphrodite, I can re-roll for her attack. I really like that. Or I can roll for something like Demeter's Sprint if I come across Demeter, which is very good for Origination. So it's a very powerful effect. I don't think it's absolutely necessary for yeah, lower fears or kind of mid-level fears. But if you're going to go with rerolls, it's certainly the one that I think you should be targeting. Artificer. Ooh. Artificer has been changed. And it is good. I'm going to put it just below the champions here. So, it's going to give you 3 opportunities throughout a run to turn a minor find into a major find. So it will turn something like Psyche or Ash into, could be health, magic, or gold, or it could be all the way up to a god boon or a hammer. It's very, very powerful when it works to that effect, but still pretty good to see just an upgrade to health or magic. Who doesn't need more of that? It also only costs 3. And they've repositioned, I believe they repositioned it now that it's in a very, very nice place for activating Divinity. If you want to complete a column, I think it's a very desirable location for actually turning the Artificer on, trying to get Divinity active. It's just a super solid pick. I think it fits more into those, either those beginner builds where you don't really know what you're looking for. You're just like, you know what, boons would be nice, right? Anything that'll just sort of fill stuff out, that'll be nice. Or just, yeah, extra health is super good. Whereas like Ash and Psyche are pretty useless as meta currency for me right now. I'm going to go ahead and take it for 3. I think it's something that it's very much on the bubble. I want it on. I'll often give it up for something like Origination or the Champions, which is why I have it just below. But it's probably the next thing I try to get active if I don't want either of those. Or I, just got the space. Maybe I could flex something else up higher here off and put it on. But in general, it is. It's just super, super solid for the cost of 3. Worth it a lot of the time. And then there's also the case of some weapons you really need a lot of stuff to get it online. So Momus and Charon are 2 that come to mind. Charon's axe, you want a gain boon, you want a cast, and you want a special. That's 3 things. Momus, you need a gain boon, a special, a cast, and an attack. That's 4, because you're going to be rotating through those Omega moves all the time, right? For stuff like that, Artificer's really, really nice, where it's just going to hopefully help you get an extra god boon out of those things that you're upgrading. And if not, well, the extra magic, especially in those cases, could be very useful. Gold to go to a shop to then buy something to fill it out, very, very useful. So a little bit nicer for aspects like that, maybe a little less desirable for things that are easier to build around that only need 1 or 2 to really come online. But yeah, certainly one I think you want to look at targeting a lot. And then Divinity. Divinity, I've mentioned a lot here. I think I'm going to go ahead and put it into B. Whereabouts in B? This feels about right. Really tough here with the Seer. So Divinity is going to give you a 20% increased chance of your boons becoming epic. Now, the whole trade-off here tends to be if you have a vow activated that is going to prime magic based on rarity, this can be bad. And if you don't have it activated, it's just always good. You always want things to be epic. So 20% is a huge jump. If you compare that to excellence, you've got a 20% chance to go all the way to epic. It's way more noticeable to go from common to epic than it is to go from common to rare. If you can hit that on one of your sort of prime boons for your build, you're really, really, really going to notice it. And then you could even potentially upgrade to heroic. It's amazing. It's really, really good. Now, if you are priming magic, so I think you always want Divinity active if you're not priming magic. Do your best to try to get that column or row completed. That's how you turn it on. It's the other thing, it is 0 grasp. It's an awakening effect. You have to get a column or a full row activated. You always, always, always want it on. But if you are priming, it's very, very flexible. Do I want it? Don't I want it? Really depends. Again, something like Momus, something like Charon, they're very mana or magic hungry aspects. You probably don't want them activated. Yeah, the increased efficacy of a boon at epic, it's nice, it's tempting. but priming that much magic is just too difficult. But if I'm running Medea, and I actually don't want my magic high, I want to run it with the Huntress, I want my magic low at all times, great, go ahead, get Divinity. It'll improve your attack. Yeah, you can have it improve your cast, your special, whatever. Prime all the magic you want. Malinui Blades, I think, is another one. You don't really care about your Omega moves. You could prime the whole bar for all I care, right? I just want epic, basic attack moves. That's kind of it. So it's really on the bubble, and that is a vow that you tend to activate very early when you're starting to increase fear. It's usually not that punishing, so even if you're up around that like 10, 12, 16, very good chance you've got it on at least the first level, but probably both. And then Divinity can be very painful. So I would say something about half the time you like it, and about half the time you really hate it. So got to be really conscious about how you're building towards things. It's in a very interesting place as far as Awakening goes. There are some builds that are very effective where it's very easy to activate it, but I do think as you go to higher fears and you want to get Origination on, you want to get more rerolls a lot of the time, it can be more and more difficult to activate it. So it's also a little bit of a drawback. Judgment. Okay, Judgment. It's the worst. It's the worst. There should probably be an F tier for Judgment. So Judgment, you have to, it's an Awakening effect. You have to have everything else off, okay? Everything else is turned off for this to activate. And I believe that gives you what? The Queen is going to be on by default, and I think there's one other Awakening effect that will be on because of it. So you kind of actually end up with a couple. And then every time you beat a Guardian, you're going to get five Arcana cards activated. So you start with basically nothing. You get through Region 1. Okay, now you've got an extra 5. Region 2, you get an extra 5. So by the time you hit Region 4, you normally have more Arcana cards than you'd otherwise be able to do. And it can put you over the grasp limit, right? It doesn't matter. It will just turn them on anyway. Thing is, you have to go without Death Defiances to start. You got to go without any kind of damage. Really what this feels like is like a self-imposed challenge fun run. And it is fun. I did a Judgment only run. It's quite fun. You don't know what you're going to get, so you're playing it really safe right from Region 1. Yeah, maybe you end up getting your Death Defiances early, and then you can start to play not so safe, but you might not get them at all, which is really daunting, actually. You could just be very unlucky. So it's a fun one, but there's really no effect. There is the one, now that I put it at the Keepsake tier list, there's the one case where probably the worst Keepsake in combination with the worst tarot card. If you could actually activate this from the piggy bank, people are telling me you can actually hit it, even though it's an Awakening effect. And they were saying they had like maxed out Arcana cards. That's the only case for this thing that I could actually see it being viable for. So if you can sort of make that happen. You might have to manipulate save files and make sure this is at a certain upgrade level along with the other Keepsake. It's really goofy. But yeah, that would be an extra way to have a bit of fun. Huntress. Huntress is very interesting. I'm gonna put it about here. So the Huntress, well, you're below 100% magic. Your attack or special are gonna deal extra damage. You know what? I think I'm gonna bump it up even higher. I think I got to get this thing up into A. This is a really difficult one as well. So if you're just starting off, let's say playing at low fears, the way that you're not at 100% magic is by using your Omega moves, which you're going to do a fair bit of the time, right? Most aspects want you to use Omega moves. You're probably going to be playing around with them. Okay, great. Now, during that period, my regular attack and my regular special are going to deal an extra 50% damage, which is a lot, right? It's quite a lot of damage. It's really where you start to get fancy with things that the Huntress becomes so effective. So you pick Vow of Panic, which is going to set your magic to 50% when you enter a location. And then you want to make sure you have no magic regeneration. You know, you don't want to gain boon that's going to like fill it up immediately really, really fast. You're intentionally going to stay low so that you can deal all this extra damage. Very effective with something like the staff. It's good with the daggers. Can be good with the axes. It's good with Medea. Lots and lots of cases for the Huntress. To just get effectively, again, I'll say free 50% extra damage. It's kind of like Origination, except it's easier to ensure that it's always going to be on, but it's also only for attacks and specials, which is only good for some aspects, probably a smaller subset than Origination. That's where I really struggle with it. For cases where it works, you can build around it. Use the Valve Panic to your favor. Make sure, yeah, you have a setup where you're not getting extra magic. Plan around it, and this thing can be extremely effective. It only costs 2, so I think it's quite good for new players to just have on. You're going to occasionally get that extra bonus while you're using your Omega attacks. Yeah, overall, very, very solid card. It's just not a staple in every single run. Again, something you've got to be very, very mindful of. Death. Okay, so Death, they have also changed. I'm going to put it into about here. The bottom end of B, it's similar to this guy here, which is now the Knight, in that only some aspects are going to benefit from it. So what does it do? Well, it makes your Omega moves deal or have a 15% chance to deal critical damage if your last Omega move was different than the one that you're using. So if you use the cast, it doesn't have the bonus, the Omega cast, but then you use the Omega attack. The Omega attack has that plus 15% chance, and then you can go back to using the cast, and it will have the increased chance of crits. So, first of all, crits are so good in Hades. They're like triple damage, so plus 200% extra damage. That's nuts. You really love increased chance of criticals. The problem here is there's not a lot of aspects that actually like to rotate Omega moves. A lot of things will weave in one Omega move a fair bit, but that's like their staple thing, right? Axe of Charon, you're just going to be dropping your Omega special. This does not work between the special and the cast, blowing it up. I've tested against Skelly like 50 times. Yeah, just isn't effective. Yeah, if you're whirlwinding with the axe, not so good. If you're just using the Omega attack on like Malinui's staff, but there's a couple instances where it's very, very good. So Persephone is one of them. Persephone is supposed to drop the Omega cast. That charges up the meter for the Omega special, and then you want to use that Omega special, drain the meter, go back to using the Omega cast. So it has a natural sort of back and forth between those two things. It's just a straight buff. It's a huge buff. It's also one of the things that's going to have an awakening effect on what is now called the Moon. So you're going to awaken another card with it, and I believe this costs 3 grasp, so not too expensive. If you're running something like Persephone, it's an auto-include. You have to have it. Just like you want your Omega cast damage, yeah, you absolutely want Death. Same thing goes for Momus. If you're rotating between all your different Omega moves, you're dropping your cast, your special, your attack, and then going between all those things. If now they all have this increased crit chance, that's enormous. You're going to get a huge benefit from that. The torches, I haven't managed to make it work with the torches. I think maybe Malinui's torches, you could make it work, right? The Omega special goes around you for a longer period, so you could do that between your Omega attacks, and at least your Omega special is going to have quite the boost. I don't think it's quite an auto-include, at least with the torches. I haven't been able to make it work that effectively. So for a lot of cases, this is just not good at all. It's terrible. Don't even look at it for so many cases. But for the cases where it is good, it's incredible. It's amazing. It becomes an auto-include. So for me, that puts it somewhere at the bottom of B. Okay, the Messenger. This is going to end up giving you a 5% chance to dodge for 1 grasp, 2 grasp. I think it's 2 grasp. Bottom of A. I'm gonna go high B with it. It's good. It's a lot of times, again, it's an auto include because it's so cheap. 5% chance to dodge is good. I think it's extremely good for newer players because, yeah, you're going to be getting hit a lot more. You're not taking that much damage, but a lot of times you're going to be getting hit. So 5% chance to negate. It's like rolling a 1 on a d20. It happens. I've played Baldur's Gate. It happens. But it's not all that effective. It's not going to negate that much damage. At low levels, you can recover a lot of the HP that you would be negating anyway. And at higher fears, where healing's turned off, you're using the pin. You're wanting to get hit in a lot of instances. How good is it to actually dodge 5% of the time? It's not a big deal. It's kind of do or die. Don't get hit anyway if you want to get it at very, very high fears. So the 5%, it's a bit of an extra lifesaver, but I think a lot of times you want stuff like, you know, your rerolls, you want origination, that sort of thing. So, yeah, the dodge chance just gets beat out by a couple others. Somewhere in the middle grounds, if you're at 20, 30 fear, for the cost of 2, yeah, it's fine, right? It's fine. I think it's in a decent place for actually filling out a row for Divinity, if I'm not mistaken. So that can be another small usage for it, but yeah, 5%. It's just a solid dodge chance, but you definitely don't need it all the time. The Furies. Okay, this one. Very, very, very good. I gotta get this way up into S. So it's pretty cheap. I believe 3 grasp. And you're going to deal 30% extra damage to enemies that are in your casts. And basically what that means, drop your cast all the damn time. I recommend, if you're playing with a controller, rebind the cast to the left trigger. You can use it while you're channeling, like the Torch Omega attacks, or you can just weave it in with any kind of normal attacks. A lot faster. It's a lot easier. And yeah, stuff's going to take an extra 30% damage. That's huge. Did I also mention Engagement Ring? It's like the best thing in the game right now. So you're going to be dropping your cast all the time with that. Hitting the stuff that's in your cast, it takes extra damage. And then that hitch effect is going to go off and deal extra damage to enemies as well. Super, super, super good. Use it in every room. Use it against bosses. I think it's an auto include. Right up here with the levers, I don't know if I ever take these 2 off. They're just so powerful. This one is about as close as you can get to free damage. Again, it's not quite free, but you want to be dropping your cast. And cast effects are quite powerful in Hades, even if you're not going with Engagement Ring. A lot of the other ones, the base casts have been reworked to be pretty damn strong. So you want them dropped down all the time just for that reason. Anyway, that the 30% damage on top of that, just another reason to keep weaving it in. The Titan. The Titan, I think I got to drop up here in S as well. Another very cheap one. It's like, I don't even know the cost of these things because I never even think of them as an option to take off. I think it's 2, maybe, grasp. Anyway, it's going to give you 40 magic and 40 HP right out of the gate. So that's huge for the start. Just not losing death defiances. That's nice. Magic is going to let you deal more damage with your Omega attacks before you get a gain boon or something like that. That's also nice. When you die, your death defiances are going to restore more. If you're running strength, it means your threshold for strength is higher, especially the Titan in combination with Freenos, the cute little frog guy. Now you've got very high HP. This threshold gets even higher. Yeah, it's just a staple include. It's kind of like this death defiance thing. It just doesn't happen to be as powerful. Same idea. You never really want to take it out, whether you're playing at low fears, high fears. It's just amazing. The Unseen. Okay, the Unseen. The effect is actually different than what's listed here. It's going to restore 6 magic every second at the cost of 5 grasp. I'm going to put it about here. about here. So the Unseen, I actually think is very good. I think a lot of people cut it when they shouldn't. Where it's really, really useful at high fear runs is early on, if you don't have a gain boon, and especially if you're running with the Onion, it's going to be a little while before you get a gain boon. It's a nice way to be able to use your Omega attacks until you get something like that online. As well, a lot of times when you get a gain boon, whether it's early on or later, you might be priming a lot of magic with Born Gain, but you don't have that high of a maximum. You have to be a little bit careful. That's going to help you out. Something like Lucid Gain on Charon's Axe, very, very popular. But there could be times later on where things are just so hectic. It's hard to actually get into your cast at some point to get the effect that comes back. The Unseen will bail you out a little bit there. So it's really going to help improve your time. If you have a time limit, it is something that helps a lot early on, and then as a diminishing effect as things go on, but it's always sort of there in the background helping out a little bit. It's especially useful in boss fights that go for a very long time, because that's when you need, the most magic, and a lot of times gain boons, they're going to sort of run out in those cases. So Lucid Gain, not really going to run out. Born Gain, going to prime a lot. But the other gains, now I have to be very conscious of. I have to stop moving to actually regenerate. I've got to switch to using my regular attack and special for Hearth Gain, that kind of thing. So it's very, very good. The problem with it is it's 5 grasp, and 5 grasp is a lot. It's like, do I want Origination or do I want the Unseen? Yeah, this helps a lot for time, but so does Origination. If I just deal a lot of damage, I don't need magic. As well, it doesn't work well with the Huntress. I oftentimes don't want these two things on. It's okay with the Valve Panic. Sometimes these can work in tandem quite well together, but I feel it, right? I'm not really sure that I want the Unseen in a case like that. It is worth noting, the very last card we've got now, which is now the Moon, it will be awakened by activating the Unseen as well. It's, one of those 3 cards that will activate it. So that's another potential benefit. And I do think hexes are much better. We'll talk about it in a bit. And I think a big reason to run the Unseen a lot of the time. So I actually think it's good. It's very good for new players who don't really want to think about like a full build and what gain do I need and whatever. It's just nice to have magic regenerating. I know when I first unlocked it, it felt amazing. But then as you go on, I don't think it should be cut quite as often as people do. I think it really does have a place in a lot of builds. Be pretty conscious about when you actually want to go ahead and cut it. But it's certainly not for every run either. It does, like I say, drop off as you get your build underway. You've got to gain that kind of thing. But give it a second look. Give it a second look, and especially through the lens of how good is it early? How much time does that end up saving me, or how much health does that end up saving me because I can use these Omega moves? You might be a little bit surprised. Maybe that's why it's called the Unseen. It's a little hard to see the benefit of it, but it's not too bad. And then this, called the Night, but it's actually the Moon now. I really, really like this thing at the moment. This is very, very difficult for me. I'm going to go ahead and put this at the top of B, actually, even above the Fates. So, like I mentioned before, this has an awakening effect. It's going to be activated if you turn on any one of Death, the Unseen, or the other one that escapes my brain at the moment here. But it's one of those top right 3 things. The Moon, which is now actually Night. This is very confusing. Death, the Night, or the Unseen is going to activate the Moon, which is the Night here. Are you confused yet? I'm confused. But what it's going to do is it's going to charge up your Hex as though you were using magic every second. I forget what the exact number is when it's fully upgraded, 3 or something like that. But the thing is, hexes have been buffed a lot. And one of the biggest buffs is that Phase Shift works against Chronos right now. So you can just use Phase Shift again and again. It doesn't charge up while something like Phase Shift is active, right? While the effect is actually active at the moment. But this in combination with actually spending magic, like using your Omega attacks, you can charge it up very, very fast, because the costs have also been brought down to a very reasonable level, like 100 for Phase Shift, something like that. So hexes are very good, the effect is very good, and it doesn't cost any grasp. The problem is the three things that you need to actually turn it on, they're all very, very situational. So in some cases, they're auto-includes, and in a lot of cases, they're auto-excludes, right? So there's a lot of cases where you just don't want to get the Knight on. But that's where I think the Unseen becomes a bit better, and where I think the Knight can be pretty good, is if you think about it in terms of what is the Knight plus the Unseen's benefit for 5 grasp. That's really the key combination I think you need to look at. Are the two things together worth 5? And suddenly it becomes a lot more of a question mark. Hexes being much, much better. There were people listing effects in... yeah, even the last Keepsakes video I did, Polymorph can be crazy good for exploding stuff. You can have minions resurrected for an entire location, or at least encounter, which is insane in like boss fights. They pump so much damage, they never ever die, they have like infinite health. Just so many good effects. Moonwater's very good if you have any kind of healing. You really, really do want to try to get this on, but I totally understand. These two are incredibly situational, and the Unseen is quite costly. But I really think you should look at trying to get these on more often than what I see people doing anyway, just because of how effective hexes are. And yeah, like I said, especially the buff to Phase Shift, it can just totally trivialize the boss fights of like Eris and Kronos if you're struggling with those, slowing things down and just pumping damage. You're effectively getting damage with the effect. And did I mention it works with the pin and it works with overtime? If you've gone overtime, or if the pin is counting down, both of those timers are also slowed down. So much good there. But yeah, cost ends up being quite high. So very comprehensive look at all the Arcana cards. Like I said, I hope you guys enjoy this content. Well, the hand's getting better. I promise we're getting closer and closer to actual gameplay. Would love to hear people's thoughts, builds, whatever. This kind of stuff, really, really fun for generating discussion. So yeah. Hopefully this helped, and stay tuned for more stuff like this in the near future.